In retrospect, Bobby Beausoleil doesn't seem particularly ambitious. Every time he came close to success, he walked away. His relationship with Kenneth Anger deteriorated and he fled. He failed to follow through on his connection with Frank Zappa. His acting career was half-hearted. The band he and Manson formed in early '68 fizzled out quickly as well. When he lacked in ambition, however, he made up for it in hero worship. He looked up to Charlie, and he also looked up to the straight Satans. He really dug the biker image and lifestyle, he has admitted. Paul Watkins recalled, "I liked Bobby, but always felt he was too superficial and arrogant to make it in the family on a permanent basis. Each time he returned, he gave Charlie something as a means of buying his way back. A car, a truck, a girl. In the summer of '69, his welcome was worn out." As July wound down, a few souls were in Death Valley, but most were hunkered at Spahn Ranch, living on the knife edge of terror. Manson wanted to get back to the desert, but the means was proving elusive. His fears that Spahn might oust them were legit. With the ranch steadily falling under Frank Rhett's control, Charlie would lose his safe place. He knew that in a showdown with the Panthers, he was a dead man, unless he could hide someplace secure. Charlie was also growing increasingly worried about defectors. Leslie Van Houten recently explained that Charlie put Tex on watch with her. She was spending too much time with the straight Satans. "I had gone up into a cave with one of the bikers, and there was one in particular named Sammy that I was enjoying, and he and I took a mattress up into a cave and spent the night. And when I came down that morning, Manson was very, very angry and threw Sammy off the ranch and told Tex, 'We're losing this one, and you need to keep an eye on her.' And then a carload of guys from Venice Beach came up to get me out of the ranch, and I wanted to go, but I felt like my feet were in dried cement. I wasn't able to follow." She went on to say that Charlie was fearful that I might leave with them, and so that was why he told Tex to keep an eye on me. The only thing that would stop people from leaving was trapping them in Death Valley, where roads were impassable and even the nearest town was hours away. The only thing preventing them from getting to the desert was money. Manson began asking everyone, who had means? Who do we know that might have extra cash to spare? Who can we lean on for financial support? On July 21st, police showed up at Spahn Ranch to question Charlie about Mark Waltz. They found Manson, who gave the name Chuck Summers, several ranch hands, John Swartz, Larry Craven, Jason Daniels, Robert Nelson, Lynette Frome, Ruth Ann Heuvelhorst, 16-year-old Oish, George Knoll, 28-year-old straight Satan, Jacqueline Lee Knoll, George's 26-year-old wife, Arnold Vitmack, a 20-year-old male, and Jack Paul McMillan, 26-year-old Bruce Davis. Swartz was arrested when it was discovered that he had stolen plates on his Ford, the same vehicle the killers later drove on their murderous rampage. Olmsted asked these 11 where the rest were. They pointed up the hill and said they were over behind them rocks. Olmsted told Manson and the others to go wake them, but was told the only way there was by dune buggy. The officers proceeded on foot to the back house. They found 8 bedrolls on the ground, 8 bayonets, a box of 200-round .32 caliber bullets, and a military-style crank phone. Olmsted realized that whoever had been sleeping there was alerted, probably by Summers/Manson, and they disappeared. Another cop, Officer Lee, noticed a new gas tank for a Volkswagen and a VW microbus. Lee was one of the officers who previously surveilled the property by helicopter. 3 days later, on the 24th, a fire engine driving down Santa Susana Pass Road saw a flatbed truck with 2 VW engines near the ranch. This info was passed to the LASO, who assigned Deputy Sheriff William Gleason to investigate. After getting hassled by the cops, Charlie again asked everyone who they knew who might have money. Yeller, Ella Jo Bailey, the shy girl who was introduced to the family through Sadie, told Manson that she heard Gary Hinman recently came into an inheritance. Charlie asked Ella if she would go to Gary's home and request that money. She declined, not because she thought Charlie had something wicked planned, but she just didn't feel like going. Bobby overheard Ella tell Manson about Gary's alleged inheritance. Gary was a gentle and generous soul who'd helped to support the family on and off for more than a year. He gave them food and clothing. He allowed Mary to register with social services using his address so she could keep her son when threatened with losing him due to the derelict conditions he had been living in with her. Gary also let several family members stay with him and opened his home to others. In early July, a married couple crashed with him, and he also hosted a teenage girl that month, a runaway from San Francisco. But even Gary grew weary of the burden of being a guardian angel. Rumors are that neighbors complained to him about members of the family panhandling in the area and being a nuisance. He had given all he could to Charlie and the others. Despite Ella Jo's refusal to coerce Gary into giving them money, Manson thought he could convince Hinman to join the family and turn over his worldly goods. He called Gary and tried first to appeal to his spiritual nature, touting the family as a messianic commune and playing upon Hinman's altruistic spirit. Gary responded that his Buddhist faith prevented him from practicing any other spiritual cause. The conversation derailed into a shouting match. Charlie ended the call by cursing Gary and his religion. That summer, 15-year-old Sherry Cooper started working at Spahn Ranch as a caretaker for the horses. On July 22nd, the Manson family initiated Cooper, who they called Simi Valley Sherry, with a group orgy that verged on rape. According to later testimony by Linda Kasabian, she saw Manson try to perform intercourse with the girl, who bit him. Charlie slapped her in the face, knocked her down, and engaged in an undetermined sexual act. He then told the male and female members of the family to engage in sexual acts with Sherry. They each took off their clothes and followed his orders. What happened next is a story that has changed and evolved many times over the past 5 decades. We may never fully know the truth, but this is what many believe happened and the current version of the story as told by the main perpetrator. The Straight Satans were having their 10-year anniversary on July 26th. They were planning a huge celebration that would include other motorcycle clubs from the Los Angeles area. Bobby wanted to get invited to their party. He approached Danny DiCarlo and got the treasurer to front him $1,000. Some reports list the money as $2,000 or even $3,000 to procure drugs for their gathering. Bobby then went to visit Gary in Topanga Canyon. Gary was making mescaline out of pure peyote in his basement for extra cash. Manson's call to Hinman was only a few days before this alleged transaction. Bobby bought $1,000 or more worth of mescaline on Friday the 25th, then met DiCarlo at Spahn Ranch to deliver the goods. Bobby also convinced Gary to give him extra mescaline for the family, with a promise to pay later. Bobby Beausoleil has changed his tune multiple times, however. It is also possible that Beausoleil attempted to buy drugs on behalf of the bikers to ingratiate himself with them, but not because they asked him to procure. Needless, his offering wasn't enough to get Beausoleil invited to the Straight Satans party, and he soon had bigger problems. The next day, several bikers showed up at Spahn Ranch to confront him. They knocked him around, threatened him with a knife, and said he'd given them a bad batch of drugs. The bikers insinuated that Bobby and Gary intentionally conspired to burn them. As Manson explained, for several weeks, Bobby had been moving Gary's stuff off on a group of bikers without any problems. But one morning, 3 of the bikers came riding into the ranch and wanted to see Bobby. The bikers said the latest batch of stuff he had sold them was bad, laced with poison. Some of their own group had gotten deathly ill, and some of the people they sold to were also sick. They wanted their money back. Bobby told them to give him the unused mescaline, and he would return it to his connection and then give their money back. The three guys fired up their bikes and pulled out of the yard, saying they wanted to hear from us the next day. Bobby and I discussed the validity of their complaint. None of our group had gotten sick, but we weren't sure if we had used the same batch. The only thing to do was to go talk to Gary about it. I got Gary on the phone and told him what was going on. Gary said he didn't see how the stuff could have been bad. He hadn't had any complaints from anyone else. Bring the stuff back and he would take a look at it. When I told him there wasn't anything to bring back, he said, "Hell, Charlie, I can't buy that. It's not good business." He was right. I wouldn't have gone for it myself. But Bobby and I were in a cross, and neither of us had $2,000 we wanted to hand over to the bikers. Tell you what, Gary, give us enough stuff to turn $2,000. We'll pay the guys their bread and then catch up with you later. Can't do that, he said. I'm getting things together so that I can go overseas for a few weeks. Besides, you guys still owe me some on the last stuff you got. His refusal and reference to the money we owed made my blood surge to the top of my head. I was instantly mad and told him, "You cocksucker, you can't leave me hanging like this. Your shit was bad and I got people on my case because of it. Now make it right." I slammed the phone down and muttered something like, "I ought to kill the motherfucker." I told Bobby we would go see him later. He's got enough money to take us off the hook, but the queer bastard's going to let us hang for his bad shit. Susan had heard the conversation and watched me slam the phone back on the hook. Later that day, Bobby and I had a talk about Hinman. I told Bobby, "It's in your hands. Handle it any way you see fit, but get those bikers off our backs." That evening, Bobby, Susan, and Mary said they were going to Gary's. Just the day before, Kitty begged Bobby to leave the ranch with her. Bobby asked Charlie if that was okay, and Manson said no. Manson also made sure to tell Beausoleil about his killing of a Black Panther, to warn the younger man that he was deadly serious about people not messing with him. Bobby was given a handgun by Danny DiCarlo and told to keep it concealed unless Hinman failed to return the money. Then he should use the gun to intimidate Gary into returning the cash. Danny and Bruce drove Bobby and the women to Hinman's house. Susan wrote in her book, The Myth of Helter Skelter, Bobby and Manson were both the tentative leaders of the family. There was something of a power struggle between him and Manson. This competitive relationship would have allowed Manson to insinuate to Bobby that he, Manson, had done his part by intercepting Crowe, and now Bobby had to show he was an active leader as well. It was also a way of assuring Bobby dirtied his hands, making it less likely he'd be willing to testify against Manson about Crowe. Manson chose to send Mary Bruner and me along as well. This is probably partly because Gary Hinman knew both Mary and me, and he would be comfortable with us. But I'm also convinced it was also because Mary and I both had infant sons back at Spahn's ranch, sons who could be used to prevent us from going to the police if anything happened. They thought that Hinman would give up the money or new drugs to sell to make up the money. Poor Gary didn't have the money and thought the bikers and Bobby were trying to scam him. He didn't realize that digging in his heels would get him killed. He didn't understand that these people were no longer his friends. According to Mary, Bobby said he's going out to go get some money from Gary, $3,000. I didn't really know what to expect, because I know that he didn't have any money. And I told Bobby I knew that he didn't have any money. But Bobby said, "Come along." So I went along, and Bobby had said, if Gary doesn't come through, well, you know. Ella testified that she heard Charlie tell Bobby and Bruce to go to Hinman's to get his money. She saw Beausoleil with a knife and Davis with a gun. Then Mary came to Bailey and asked for some gloves. She was wearing dark clothes, creepy crawl clothes, and said she was leaving to go with Bobby to Gary's. Ella watched Mary and Susan depart the ranch early that evening with Bobby, Bruce, and Danny.